Ed Campbell.
Hello, Dugmore.
Welcome to the park.
Thank you. It's great to be here in the park.
Politics in the park, because there's commercial content being filmed in our studio.
And thank God for that.
Thank God for that. Keeping the lights on and the rain off their heads, maybe not ours. PMQs, reactions. Let's watch a clip.
Let's.
The Prime Minister said he was going to lose 1,000 seats, and then he managed it. After 13 years, a Tory promise they actually haven't broken. And this is the Prime Minister who's only had to fight for two things in his life. Last year, he lost a Tory beauty contest to the member for South West Norfolk, who then lost to a lettuce. Last week, when he finally came into contact with voters, he lost everywhere. No matter who the electorate is, the Prime Minister keeps entering a two-horse race and somehow finishing third. Given his track record, who does he think he's actually got a mandate from?
Mr. Speaker, it's a bit rich to hear about mandates from the person who's broken every single promise he was elected on. I mean, go through the list, Mr. Speaker. Nationalisations, NHS outsourcing, universal credit, and now tuition fees. Mr. Speaker, he was for them all before he was against them. He's not just a softie, he's a flaky too.
If I was Keir Starmer, I wouldn't be bragging about how the Labour Party's done in these. Yeah, okay, look, they have added seats, and that's important. I think about more than 500, right, or around about there anyway. For me, the story from those local election results is it's a Tory loss, not a Labour win. My interpretation of those results is that the Tories have lost 1,000 seats, but the Lib Dems have put on almost as many as Labour, and also crucially, the Greens have doubled the amount of councillors they've added. And the year before, they doubled the amount of... the election cycle before, they also doubled the amount of councillors they had. So it's like exponential gains for the Greens. That's probably the big story from these local election results for me. If I was Keir Starmer, okay, yeah, he's won. He's going to brag about it. But it's spin. I don't think that's not the big takeaway from these results for me.
I actually kind of disagree with you.
Yeah?
In terms of, I sort of equate vote against the Tories as a Labour victory.
Yep.
As in, so regardless of regardless of the motivation, in the next general election, if the Tories tank, Keir Starmer is going to be the next Prime Minister. It doesn't matter whether that's majority, whether that's in a coalition with either the Lib Dems or the SNP or the Greens or all of them perhaps.
Yep.
He's going to be the next Prime Minister. I don't think there's much point gnashing your teeth about, not you in particular, I mean the wider leftist movement about...
Your teeth look terrible. Stop gnashing.
about purity. If the Tories are losing, and it's not as if the Lib Dems or the Greens or the SNP are going to side with the Tories in the coalition.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. No, that is a really good point. Labour don't have to win a majority.
No.
In the next election, they can run a minority government and sort of face down the Lib Dems, the SNP, and say, this is the programme.
Definitely.
If you don't want to vote for it, be my guest. But
imagine the conversation. They're talking about negotiations at the moment between coalition discussions between probably Labour and Lib Dems, Labour and SNP. And did you see what the SNP would be asking for? It's not independence. It's not even a referendum. It's not more devolved powers. It's rejoining Erasmus. It's so like weak, and it just shows.
Mr. Starmer, these are our terms.
So the discussion would go, "Hello, Mr. Stephen Flynn, how are you?" And he'd say, "Starmer, so lovely to see you, my man. If we will join you in coalition if you give us like Indie Ref or even Erasmus." Starmer says, "Are you going to vote with the Tories?" Mr. Flynn will reply no, and Starmer will go, "Well, we're not going to give you that,
Yes,
and we'll still be in government."
Thank you very much, sir. 3 bags full, sir. Yeah.
I think the local elections are interesting because I think it says more about the wider, perhaps, appeal for more left-wing, more progressive policies, such as the Greens are providing at local level. But I don't really think it suggests that Starmer is in any danger at a national general election level.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not from Rishi Sunak based. I know we've only just watched the one clip, but if you looked at the breadth of Rishi's answers, there were so many times in that session where he delivered what he thought was a zinger, and there was just like silence. Like he has, the people who are there and they're meant to be cheering him on, he has the charisma of a fish that's been washed up on a beach. He's not a funny man. He has no sense of timing, unlike us. He has no sense of comedic timing. Whoever is writing his gags, it's atrocious. I don't think. We talk about the last couple of weeks. We've been talking about Keir Starmer a lot, which I think is almost indicative of like the point you made, which is the direction that national politics is going in. It's almost not worth talking about Rishi Sunak, even though he's the fucking Prime Minister.
Absolutely not.
Because he's almost like a dead ring. I know, like, plenty can happen. I don't know, what's a good example? Thatcher before the Falklands, maybe, where there's the entire political discourse is like, Thatcher's done, Argentina invades the Falkland Islands, and nothing like a war to boost the poll ratings, right? So this could all change. There's plenty of time for it to change.
If Argentina claims the Malvinas.
Again. Las Malvinas, Argentinas, again. I don't know. Look, Lord knows what could happen. It's a long time, right? Probably a year, maybe 18 months until the next general election. I'd certainly be wanting to call it as late as possible if I was Rishi. So there's plenty of time for them to turn it around, I guess.
Something that I do think your fishman Rishi did quite well, actually, was he revealed his hand, I think, against what he's going to do to try and make life as difficult for both Labour and the Lib Dems as possible. So in that clip we just watched, he made the point, or reminded the public, that Starmer has broken every single one of the pledges that brought him to that made him a Labour Party leader. And that is it is a fact that he was dishonest about those pledges.
Yep.
And if you remind the general public of his personal dishonesty, that probably makes it a lot harder for the general public to vote for him. And then there's another clip that I'm going to show you now.
Mr. Speaker, last week many lifelong Conservative voters turned to the Liberal Democrats to be their strong local champions. They delivered their verdict on the government's failure to hold water companies to account for dumping raw sewage into our rivers and onto our beaches. Last year, water bosses were paid £15 million in bonuses, rewarded for destroying our precious natural environment. 3 of those executives have now turned down their bonuses, but they should never have been entitled to them in the first place. So will the Prime Minister ban these sewage bonuses so that the dumping actually stops?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I struggle to hear the full question, but I think in one sense it doesn't really matter, because we all know the Liberal Democrats say one thing here and another thing locally anyway. And it is remarkable. No wonder he's attracted to the Labour leader these days, Mr. Speaker. Political opportunism and a broken promise on tuition fees. It must be like looking in the mirror.
So in that clip, Rishi Sunak is replying to Ed Davey.
Yep.
And says that Ed Davey and Keir Starmer must be a match made in heaven because they're both political opportunists who lie about tuition fees. So I think both of which are like they're it's true largely they're both Lib Dems by and large are just opportunistic, and they both broke pledges about tuition fees, which I think is a really important and damaging point to both of the political reputations of both men.
Well, yeah, I guess Keir Starmer can say to Rishi, you've lost, or you've lost the 2 contests that you've been involved in. Rishi will just reply, well, you lied about yours, you won yours by lying. So, who's the bigger cunt? I don't know. There's also Starmer's justification for all of these reversals on these pledges, right, is he says difficult choices have to be made. We've had to make difficult choices, and I don't know about you, but that for me, that just sounds like David Cameron and George Osborne, right? In the 2010 campaign, that's like
it's incredibly euphemistic for a really brutal policy you're about to enact.
Yeah. Look, difficult choices. Look, we're all suffering. We've all had to pay. We've all got to tighten our belts.
It's all like just all carrot, no stick.
No
shit,
all stick, no carrot.
stick.
Unless the carrot's going
all
somewhere.
Stick,
it's
no
all carrot if the carrot's going somewhere it's not meant to go.
Yeah,
in which case it's all carrot.
You're being choked with the carrot and it's being shoved up your arse.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that. You went initially for a slightly more PC version, but yeah, it's all carrot, no stick. I mean, yeah, the Lib Dems did well in the local elections, right? They always do. They have a ground game. We talked about this in the podcast with Ben.
Yeah.
They have a ground game, and they'll also tell you whatever you want to hear in order to. You like the bypass? We'll build the bypass. Oh, you're against? Oh, well,
don't worry
we
then.
won't build the bypass.
Schrodinger's bypass.
Yeah, it's a good one. Schrodinger's bypass. But yeah, I mean, it's just cute. I just, I get like a warm fuzzy feeling when Ed Davey stands up in the House of Commons. I'm just like, yeah, you go, Sir Ed. Oh, both Ed Davey and Keir Starmer are Knights of the Realm. Sir Keir Starmer, and that is one of, I don't know if you noticed with Rishi, but that's one of his favourite attack lines, right? He calls him like Sir Softy.
Sir Flaky this week.
Yeah, he called him Sir Flaky this week, but both of which are obviously like insanely lame and terrible insults, but they both are preceded by the word Sir. And I think that's something that Rishi is at pains to highlight, is the kind of the class position of Keir Starmer, and that he's actually like an Islington elite.
But isn't that nuts? Like, Starmer's he's not even an Islington elite, he's Camden elite.
Yeah.
But also,
But that's
Rishi
a distinction
Sunak,
that no one else cares about.
no, but like Rishi Sunak is genuine elite.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
He's a multi-hundred millionaire.
Yeah.
Like it's such bollocks,
Well,
frankly,
I think
for
they're
spin.
Yeah, I guess they're both elites in different ways, right? Like Keir Starmer, you could say, is part of the establishment in the sense that he was like the head of the CPS, like a public institution. It was a narc, but prosecuting people for, amongst other things, obviously, but like, fucking cannabis possession. And then Rishi Sunak is sort of the new establishment in that he's like a Silicon Valley tech millionaire. Well, not tech. Yeah, it was a tech fund, wasn't it? And he was in the city first, and then it was a tech fund. He's, basically like the most sort of like City of London, Silicon Valley, new money type guy. And they're almost two sides of the same establishment coin.
Yeah,
Elite coin.
absolutely. Matt Goodwin
An elite coin coming to you soon from our own crypto fund.
and his dog there.
And there's a dog.
Another clip.
Another clip, Ed Campbell. Roll the tape.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has previously declared, and I quote, "My daughter is the climate change champion in our house." I wonder if he's asked her what she thinks about Rosebank, the biggest undeveloped oil field in the North Sea, which would blow climate targets, create more emissions than 28 of the world's poorest countries combined, involve the obscene transfer of £4 billion of taxpayers' money to a Norwegian energy firm, Equinor, and do nothing for energy security since the vast majority of the oil will be exported. If he gives it the green light, will he be able to look his daughter in the eye and honestly say that he has done everything in his power to give her and all other young people a livable future?
Mr. Speaker, as the Independent Committee for Climate Change has acknowledged, we will need fossil fuels for the next few decades as we transition to a greener future. And during that period, it makes absolutely no sense to not invest in the resources we have here at home, to import foreign fossil fuels, not create jobs here, and import them at twice the carbon emissions as our local resources. It is an economically illiterate policy, Mr. Speaker, but that's what you'd expect from the Green Party.
So the thing I thought about that clip with Caroline Lucas, which is, an interesting point. I was surprised, by the way, as well. She didn't mention the local election results at all. Like, she's just like, green issues, bang.
Greens are business focused. They don't gloat. They don't have time to gloat.
They don't have time to gloat.
They only get one question.
we're in the serious business of asking one question. But it was more Rishi Sunak's reply. Like, I think the question from Caroline Lucas is a valid one, which is, taxpayer money to Equinor, which is basically like a Norwegian company, new fossil fuel extraction, no bueno. And for Rishi to reply to her and basically be like, no, silly woman, you are economically illiterate. I did not like that.
No.
I thought he came across as really condescending. I've never picked up on this before with Rishi, and maybe this is like I'm overanalyzing it a bit, but Boris always used to really struggle with like feisty, pointy questions from women. Like, he did not like a woman asking him a question in that way. And like, Rishi is right to say that it's worse for us to import fossil fuels than it is for us to just extract them ourselves. But we're going to export them, so...
Yeah, so his point is largely irrelevant. It's also, I think, it's kind of a separate point, but Caroline Lucas talked about, Sunak says his daughter is like the eco-warrior in their house, which I just hate that. I think it's such a dereliction, or it diminishes the importance of the climate emergency to such a ridiculous degree by saying like, oh, it's like, it is literally the problem of my 13-year-old daughter. Because what it is ultimately her problem. It will kill her. Sunak might die before her, but it will kill his daughter. So maybe that's why she's more concerned about it. She's the most severe case of climate anxiety of anybody. It's so like...
I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. It kind of diminishes it by...
He's the Prime Minister of Great Britain.
You should care. you should fucking care, Rishi.
I think you should care about every issue more than your daughter does, regardless of how progressive she is and how good her ideas are.
Yeah, man, bang on.
Ugh.
Bang on. Do we have another clip? Or
We
is
do
that
have
it?
another clip.
Roll the tape.
It's Stephen Flynn.
Stephen Flynn, my guy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Prime Minister was to go to the boot of his Land Rover and pull out some placards which said "Save our nom-doms," would he expect to be arrested by the police?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, can I first put on record my thanks to the police for all their hard work over the weekend, ensuring that the coronation was a success. Now, look, on this issue, Mr. Speaker, we believe the police should have powers to make sure that they can protect the public from unnecessary and serious disruption. I respectfully recognise that the Honourable Gentleman disagrees with our position. I guess the question for both of us is, what does the Honourable Leader of the Opposition think about this? Because it's quite hard to keep up.
So once again, Stephen Flynn asks the question that Keir Starmer maybe should be asking at Prime Minister's questions. What did you think of him going there on the sort of over-encroachment of policing and the infraction of our civil liberties that was sort of front and centre with those arrests at the coronation?
Yeah, I think Stephen Flynn has a good record on this. He's speaking up for civil liberties and that kind of left aspect, which perhaps Starmer is lacking. I was at a demonstration for the right to strike outside Downing Street, and Stephen Flynn spoke at it, and he went down incredibly well with everyone there. He's making the points that people would like the leader of the Labour Party to make, and that people might say, well, that makes Starmer electorally vulnerable to the left, and I just don't really think it does necessarily. Why? I think kind of what I was touching on earlier, like the SNP aren't ever going to vote with the Tories. The SNP's entire raison d'etre depends on the Tories being in government. If you have a progressive centre-left government in the UK, it makes Scottish independence a whole lot less appealing or a lot less seemingly necessary. Imagine like Stephen Flynn or Ian Blackford's or Mary Black standing up and railing against hopefully the quite progressive actions of a UK government that's like raising people's quality of life. It doesn't quite paint the same picture.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I wonder as well, you mentioned earlier like the price of an SNP coalition, right, with Labour. If the Lib Dems somehow manage to like gain, I don't know, to be like Kingmaker-esque role, their price is probably going to be electoral reform. Mm-hmm. Don't think it needs to be decided by a referendum if they get in and they're into government. It's probably going to be part of their manifesto, so you can kind of say, change the electoral system, otherwise we're not part of it. Mm. Presumably in favour of a more proportionally representative system, otherwise it wouldn't be to their benefit. So one assumes that would be the change they make. I think that poses a more serious... That's like a more serious vehicle for a sort of challenge from the left to the Labour Party, because if you adopt that system, it then makes it easier for Greens, Lib Dems to get into Parliament.
Yeah. And
then challenge Starmer's Labour Party from that flank.
But then I think Starmer can again say, are you going to vote with the Conservatives? And they'll say no.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, well, don't worry, we won't do the PR thing. The first past the post helps Labour as well. Labour have no real incentive to change it, apart from like maybe a moral one.
Obviously, this is like completely hypothetical. But if it was a coalition type situation where Labour, let's say, were minority and they wanted to build a coalition to form a government that lasts for the full Parliament,
yeah,
they will have to make concessions.
True. Yeah.
Like they will have. Otherwise, it will be confidence supply or it will be minority, and the SNP, the Lib Dems, etc., will bide their time until they find an opportune moment where they think it's to their advantage to have another election, and they'll collapse the government.
But then, I suppose another layer beyond that though is, if they did that, then there'd be a risk of a Conservative government.
Yeah.
I think it's like what ruined the SNP in the 70s. Like they brought down Callaghan's government in the late 70s and brought in Thatcher.
You got to back yourself.
Tories.
Yeah. You've got to back yourself, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't be like going into an election and being like, yeah, well, the Tories might win.
I don't
Why
know.
are you in politics?
Yeah, but they know like the SNP.
You've got to think you're going to win.
The SNP can never win a UK general election.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
Lib Dems will never win a UK general
I
election.
will fucking make sure of it. Over my dead body, son.
That's the new PoliticsJOE position, is that we will commit harakiri if there's ever a Lib Dem
Don't give them the satisfaction.
government.
That's what they all fucking
Live streamed on Twitch.
The Paul Joe position is opposition to everyone, right? Apart
Yeah.
from ourselves. Elect Paul Joe. Vote Paul Joe.
Vote PoliticsJOE.
Is that the end?
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Cheers.